Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you with part 2 of my conversation with Cherron Perry Thomas. Last week, Charron told us about how a young woman from the South found her way to the North and became all about plants. And in this episode, she's going to take us on the journey of Black Cannabis Week and the Diasporic Alliance for Cannabis Opportunities. And in case you missed it, she is a serial entrepreneur and diversity activist. She is founder and president of Green Dandelion Marketing and Sales, which grew out of a desire to introduce retailers to innovative plant-based products. Since its founding 20 years ago, Green Dandelion has helped clients launch more than 2,000 products in grocery stores and health stores in the Mid-Atlantic United States. Clients include manufacturers of biodynamic, organic, non-GMO, vegan, and fair trade products, helping to solidify their commitment to leaving a positive impact on the planet and all lives, which she further nurtures as co-owner of Plant and People, a Black women's owned boutique offering houseplants, supplies, plant wellness products, services, and gifts. And we had a great introduction to how that business is growing and thriving in an ever-changing ecological environment. So that's nice to hear. She is a certified social impact strategist, and she applies her skills as the director of social impact at the Diasporic Alliance for Cannabis Opportunities. And that is where we pick up the conversation, speaking about that and Black Cannabis Week. So speaking of, you've brought us to a good point because you were speaking a little bit more about diaspora. So the Diasporic Alliance for Cannabis Opportunities, and speaking of plants, how did you find cannabis as a plant that is near and dear to you and motivated you to be a part of this movement?
Yeah. So again, through my work through Green Dandelion, one of our largest companies that we helped to grow from its infancy all the way up to being sold for, I think it was like $150 million when they were sold. It was a company out of Canada that had a protein that was made out of hemp. And I knew it was healthy. I read all about it and I knew how important it was to the body. But for some reason, I did not connect it with the cannabis plant that people are locked up for until I read a book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And at that same time that I was reading that book, the Farm Bill Act had passed. And the Farm Bill Act allowed any cannabis product that was 0.3% or less was legal to be sold and grown in the United States. And I thought, like, wow, well, what about all these people who've been locked up for this? And what about all the people who are doing this in a gray market who would possibly like to do this full time as a career with benefits and insurance and savings plans and all of these other things and not having to look over their back? And that's when I realized that we have a huge cannabis industry that's continued to grow here in the United States, but there are few Blacks who are involved. And I thought that it was just in the United States, but as I started looking and researching more, I realized that it wasn't just in the United States, but it was also on the continent. And the report from, I want to say it was 2018, so the UN report on cannabis, it was either 16 or 18. Ghana happened to be the number one cannabis producing country. However, if you were in Ghana, you would not have ever known that there was cannabis being grown unless you were in those elements. I've never seen anything to allude to anything different. I mean, in other countries, I've seen things, I've seen things in other places. I've never seen that in Ghana. So I was really surprised. And even just going to Zambia, another high cannabis company. And so the people in these regions are not benefiting. And so when you look at cannabis, just like with any other product that's grown out of the ground, It's an agricultural product. So from an agricultural product, not only do you have a workforce, you have supplies, you have a whole community of people who are making money off that. You have a whole community of people who are paying for tuition, books, schools, to help and propel the next generation into the future. But when that supply chain only 2 or 3 people who are probably in an undisclosed whatever. And so this is a product that can benefit the whole entire community. We invited 1 year someone from the country of Lesotho. So on the continent that are legalized. South Africa is one of them. Lesotho is another one. And Ghana has recently, I think early this year,
Yes,
has a bill that was passed. Zambia as well, Zimbabwe is another one. And so many of these countries are starting to look like, okay, so this big boom is happening. We've been doing it. How do we now start benefiting? But I mentioned Lesotho because we were looking for an African to come to our conference.
Mm-hmm.
We could not find one.
Really?
We could not find. No, we could not find one. Everyone was white or Indian, and the from Lesotho were just that. I mean, we're grateful that they came and that they share, but we were very surprised. And so, going back to what I said earlier, the same issues they're having in the United States is the same they're having on the continent with inclusion, and also the Caribbean out as well. So we have to have this global understanding of what the plant is, how the plant can benefit ourselves from a wellness perspective, but also how it can support the communities in which we live in.
Absolutely. I love that you've brought this up because I'm a vocal advocate of the cannabis industry and the sector, particularly in Africa. And so one of the challenges I heard you speaking about in preparation for last year's conference about policy. And one of the things that I think has been a hindrance to some extent with policy and liberalizing has been that most African countries have gone the way of Europe and the United States in terms of liberalizing their cannabis policy. So starting with industrial and medicinal, and then creating then an insider's way of, again, legislating who gets licenses, et cetera, as opposed to really thinking from a homegrown perspective. And I think part of that is, as you noted, is that the people who are involved are a little bit a part of this big capital situation. You know, it's not the home growers that are the small women farmers who have been doing it for however long. And then now there's regulation around it and figuring out how to really move in that space. So when you think about how to move that inclusion piece, particularly from a policy perspective, what are some of your thoughts on, for Ghana, for example, it has been legalized, the bill has been passed, and now it's about the instrument, the legislative instrument, and all of the regulatory pieces about the testing, et cetera, that is where it all lies. So what are your thoughts on how it has been liberalized and how compared to the US? Because now we're at the point of, okay, let's just be more liberal in general because that is more economically viable for the smallholder farmer because industrial and medicinal requires a lot more capital. What are your thoughts on how to ease that transition or even just to equip Africans and others in the African diaspora, the Caribbean, as you mentioned, with the ability to take part and be a part of the sector?
I agree. That has sort of like the copycat approach. And many of these communities and cultures have had this plant as part of their health regime for thousands of years. The same exact racist tactic banned it, and in the United States also went to the UN to lobby for that same banning. So I do believe that these countries should advocate to have it restored to where it was, like pre the 1920s, which was that pre-prohibition period. Because it, again, it went throughout the whole entire world. I think that it should go back to that time. I think that the power of the plant should be in the hands of the people and not in corporations. I think that the corporations can continue to exist as they are because they can be more innovative, they can have more bells. But I think at the end of the day, every community, every person should have their own right, should have right to grow, to have the right to usage. I do believe in safety. I think that's the one thing that I will say is that we need to keep safety in mind in terms of the type of product putting on the print. People are using, insecticides. They're using products that are probably not the best. I think that understanding the importance of safety, knowing, again, we talked about the connection of farmers, knowing where your plants are grown, how they're grown are really important, especially when it comes to a wellness point of view. I think that they do have to become innovative and not copycats of some of the same mindset that has in a way and in the place where we are right now, which is behind.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And so tell us about Black Cannabis Week. We're on the eve of it. So tell us about that initiative and what's in store for this year's edition.
Yeah. So Black Cannabis Week happens every year in the fourth week of September. And we've always had a virtual component of it. This year, we're going to take that virtual component on the road.
Oh, nice.
And we are calling it the Daily Dose Tour, which is our East Coast community tour. So we start in Virginia, we go to Maryland, we go to New York, we'll end up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And on the last day, which is Thursday, we will end up in Trenton. On that Friday, we will have our policy breakfast. And our policy breakfast is important because nowhere in any country, in any state, can you do this without the elected officials?
Right.
So we need the elected officials, one, to know where people are, what people are thinking, and really hear their voices. We want those who are in those decision-making rooms to hear our voices. And a lot of times people don't have that opportunity or that space to do that. And then later, after the policy breakfast, is our film festival. The Rooted in Justice Film Festival highlights those social justice stories and featuring viewings. I think we have about 8 different films at this point. And a panel discussion and our social justice vendors will be available on that Friday. And what we're really excited about is not only just this event is a fashion, music, and just cannabis culture. So we're excited about that on Friday evening. And the next day, we're moving to our full, what we call unconference experience at the Cannabis Opportunities Conference. That's where we'll have our wellness pavilion. We have our civic engagement area, our supply chain of color vendors, our advocacy role. We have free medical marijuana cards because we're in Pennsylvania. We're still a medical marijuana state. We have our career fair, things that are going to be educational, but we like to say not boring. So again, I said, we have to be big. So we're not going to do the same thing, just have someone speaking on the stage. We're including the community. So we like to let loose and have fun. This year, we're including the Canna Family Feud, which will be elected officials, stakeholders, owners, license holders, sort of like a debate and battling and educating at the same time. Another fun activation we have is something called Battle of the Plant. Again, the battle is North versus South because, I mentioned I live in the North, but I'm from the South, and there's just some things that we do differently. And so we will be, again, just doing that in an educational way, learning with fun through this unconference model. And both of those days, these Rooted in Justice Film Festival, as well as the Cannabis Opportunities Conference, are free. We've been doing this for 7 years now. This is our 7th year.
Nice.
And we're looking forward to this being one of the biggest years. So hopefully, if you have the opportunity, please check our website, blackcannabisweek.com, as well as our social media at Black Cannabis Week as well.
And all of that will be in our show notes, folks. These are going to be really rich show notes. So that is so exciting. I really love where you're coming from, because what I find is that because of the long-term stigmas, the education around the plant is always about, demonizing it. It's terrible. It'll make you crazy and all these things. So how have you, over the 7 years that you've been doing this, how have you seen kind of the community around accepting the medical side and the health benefits side changed in the communities that you've been working with?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Because first of all, a lot of folks in our community didn't even realize that you can actually obtain a medical card. In our state, we have 23 medical conditions. And the safety net, it's not the end all, but it is a reason for patients, particularly patients, to utilize the medicine that they need to function properly, right? A lot have been doing it in fear for years. And so having that medical card allows you to go to spaces where you can actually obtain it in a safe manner. So that's one thing a lot of people didn't realize, that actually exists, and it does. Have heard so many. As a matter of fact, I had a young man who's a returning citizen. Well, actually, he's not young. He's in his mid-60s, but he was a returning citizen after being locked for over 40 years. And he needed art, but was afraid to go on the street or anything. And I just saw him the other day, and he just showed me. He was like, "Yeah, since I went to your conference, I've had this card. I get this card every year." And he was just so happy to show me that he had cards. So I do hear things like that from folks. I've heard, because one of the other things we do is we have a career fair. I've heard people say that, "Oh, I got a job because I came to the conference." People have met funders for their cannabis businesses from the conference. So we know that there has been a lot of interaction, a lot of positive interaction from folks who just really did not know this world existed. I can just give you an example of my dad. Long time, has worked in the state prisons, and he came to the conference here, and I was kind of beating around the bush to asking him what he learned, what did he think, and it was fun. When I, finally asked him about it, when he returned home, one of the things that my dad said after attending the conference was that, he thought that a lot of what he knew wasn't true. He made the connection with even though he worked in the prison system, he realized too that a lot of that was unfair for those people who were incarcerated for cannabis. And oddly enough, this is someone who has been someone played by the book. He's, an upstanding deacon and a community member. And so anything dealing with illicit activity is not in his rule book at all. And so for him to come and see another side, to hear from the professionals, but not only the professionals, but the people who have actually been impacted, and realize as well that there's a parallel industry that's doing the exact same thing without recourse. We cannot have that. We cannot have that. And so he saw some of those wrongs, and he saw as well as some of the benefits. And when he went back, I think it was his orthopedic surgeon he had had tremors for a long time. And so when my dad got back and went to the doctor, he realized that his doctor's tremors were gone. And he said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, well, I went to Arkansas and I got me, I got some medical cannabis.
Right.
And it was just like such perfect timing, because no other time would they probably have even had that type of conversation. With my dad going to the conference, it opened him up to have a more of a dialogue and conversation with someone in a state where they don't even have a medical program. Tennessee does not even have a medical program, right? And so it's part of just having more education is also to have more empathy, to have more understanding, and to really destigmatize people. Because like most people growing up, I mean, you look at anyone who's associated with that plant as someone who's bad, someone who's evil, someone who has caused their own downfall and issues, when it's all a lie.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, because it's all about mindset. So I want to ask you about your mindset hack. So what is your favorite or an innovative mindset hack, one that you practice, one that you know of, or one that you can imagine?
I'm pretty sure you know what I'm going to say. It's gardening.
Okay. I love it.
It's gardening. It's definitely gardening. I do, one of the most instrumental mind hacks is pulling weeds. Yeah, it's pulling weeds.
I can agree with you, because, growing up, just like, I always liked being outside, but when it was the weed pulling time, it was always like angst. But now in my garden, it's just so nice to just like free up the other plants to be weed free. And it's just like, it's like exhaling every time a weed comes out.
Right. No, it really is. It's just, it's something about pulling weeds, and then depending on where you're growing, sometimes, you have to be a little bit more delicate. You have to be a little bit more mindful and intentional not to pull, this plant that, you may have, spent tons of money on, or something that's in a family heirloom, which, I know a lot of people don't think about plants as heirlooms, but if you've had a plant that your ancestors have had, or like these things may have value. They mean a lot. And so you want to just kind of, like I said, have that intention and mindfulness that, yes, I want you to be separated from this, so this can flourish and grow. But yeah, weeding, gardening, and I'm also a trail runner. So that is, I know you asked me for one. I probably got a couple.
No.
I probably have a couple, but just really being out in nature is one of the things that I really appreciate. I appreciate seeing how the insects flow, how the birds fly, how just certain things that only happen a certain time of the year, like when, the turtles are crossing, or when the butterflies are coming out, or or the lightning bugs, or whatever. It's just something about that just makes me feel like things are in sync. Everything is not destroyed and manufactured. Like there's still some things that are happening that are natural things, that are like things that have been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah. I love that. So before we let you go, you've kind of started to talk about what you do when you're not working and when you're not building communities, but we're curious about who Charron is when she's not being an activist and social impact marketer and planting and all those things. Are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens? Or, in addition to the trail running and the planting, what else do you do with your leisure time?
Yeah, so my definitely my leisure time is running. I don't get an opportunity to read as much. Yeah, I tend to read more for education than leisure.
Sure.
I don't watch a lot right now. I can say I'm on YouTube.
You watch nature.
Right. I'm on YouTube University
Uh-huh.
because in this new
Mm-hmm.
expansion, having a cafe is something that we haven't done. So I'm on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
University watching that day in and day out to learn more. But I think for me, just really, I'm a doer. I like to do things, and so I think just really going out in nature is something that I strive to do. And so
Mm.
it's I don't spend as many hours as I used to because I just don't have that time, but it is something that brings balance to my life.
So as a fellow runner, I'm always curious about what you run in. So what is your go-to running shoe right now?
The Hokas are yeah, I was a
Okay.
Saucony person
Yeah.
for years. And so
Yeah.
I think I probably had my first hokum like maybe 8 years ago, which is so funny now because I remember when they first started coming to the marathons, and it's like, oh, who's gonna wear those ugly things, you know? And I
Right.
cannot believe
Yeah.
over COVID, it just like blew up, and you barely
My
right
goodness,
everybody,
everybody.
and you
Yeah.
barely see
Yeah.
Sauconys anymore. And but those
It's
were,
true.
all my marathon pictures. I that's all I have on, and so the last two marathons I think I've run with Hocus. So
Okay. Okay. Nice. Yeah. So I was an A6 for a long
Mhm,
time and then discovered, did Brooks, did the
mhm.
Saucony's, and then Saucony discontinued a shoe that I
Yeah,
loved. It was the Hurricane years and years ago, and I was just so
me
gutted by
too.
it. But I did go through the Hoka phase, and now I'm back to Asics for some reason. And so I think they've changed their design a little bit. So we'll see how it all works out.
I have to check. Yeah, I'm getting ready to start preparing for my December marathon.
Oh,
So
there you
I will
go.
be in the
Yeah.
running shoe store zone.
The shopping phase. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Sharon, this has been so wonderful. I'm so happy that you were able to make time to come and talk to us about Black Cannabis Week and being planty. I just love it. And so I want to ask if you have any last thoughts you want to share, but I particularly want to get a sense of what your vision is for the diaspora in the cannabis space.
Yeah, so my vision is to really see people take this plant seriously
Mm,
as for everything that it can do and everything that it is, from the food, from the shelter to the clothing to the
yes.
medicinal and wellness side. It's one of the few plants that have so many properties and so many uses, and stop separating this from other plants. One of the things that we say in Plant and People, and we have a t-shirt that says all plants matter, because they really do. And
Hmm.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately,
Mm,
again, we've allowed racism to divide, and
yeah.
maybe that's a new word. Maybe we should call it plantism,
Mhm.
because it's
Right.
happening, right? It's happening.
Yeah.
And so people are separating it. My vision is to see people become more educated, to make their own decisions, and to use this plant as a source of economic independency, because most folks who are either here or on the continent, we're dependent on other entities for our economic existence. And hopefully this plant can be one of those things that can be used to support that independence that we need.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. All right, Glocal citizens, be sure to check the show notes again, as I mentioned, because you can find out all things Black Cannabis Week and all about Charron's businesses and plant people if you're in the Philadelphia area. As always, you can catch us with new episodes Tuesdays at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, and just, stay planty, folks. It's a good thing. Until next time, bye for now.